talking to, I think it was Gary or was it Carol, I can't remember, we were at this talk and he said, what would you like with Hans? And I couldn't think of anything, and I thought, joys and heartache, that something just came to my mind, because childbirth is both, isn't it? Mainly the former, obviously, should be a joy, but there's a heartache as well, both for mothers and babies sometimes, and I think knowing what we were talking about, I thought we'll discuss some of those. I think the joys are obvious. I think I got this picture from the internet just to say, who doesn't like a baby who's cute? Everybody, even the most hardened macho men, when they see a little baby, oh, isn't he lovely, or isn't he lovely? So it is obvious why we have children, because lots and lots of reasons. So, I think I got a slide here, and I was trying to look for why women would want children, and give you a few more reasons. I think somebody said it's the closest they'll ever come to magic. So I think this was before Harry Potter thing, and I think it's true, isn't it? I remember when my son was born first time, 1994, 2 o'clock, 11th of May, and it was like, I just wanted to go around hugging people and jumping up and down, and it was fantastic. I think I now understand what it must be like to score a goal in the cup final, and that's how I felt. And I think anybody who's had children, not just women, men as well, I'm sure you've got children. I don't know, no? So it's...
I've got a cat. It's very similar. It keeps me up at night, costs a fortune.
Yeah, that's the best bit. That is the best bit, and then it all goes downhill afterwards. You become much poorer, and you become sleepless and older and greyer, and eventually go bald. So it's... I've got this next slide here. Which is the pelvis after the babies. Yeah, that one. I don't know if you can read. It says that from the pelvic rim to the exit, it's about 11 centimeters, which I roughly estimated was 4 inches. So I've said only about 4 inches to travel for the most dangerous journey you will never undertake. And it's actually true. It is very, very dangerous. So it takes on average about 11, 12 hours. So, oh gosh, I don't know how much is that. It's 1/3 of an inch every hour, isn't it? It's about the same as the Bradford traffic. So, so it's. I think I can't emphasize it. And if you can see, this is the kind of landmark, isn't it? When we obstetricians and midwives feeding for the baby's head, that's the kind of landmark we used to feel is what is the head going below the brim, because there's 2 aspects to labour. One is the cervix, which is normally just a long, closed tubular thing, has to dilate. So if you imagine this is cervix, it opens up, it shortens, and it just completely opens. So there's nothing left, basically. You can't feel anything. So that has to dilate, and then the baby's head has to descend down the pelvis. And those 11 centimetres are quite traumatic. And the other problem is the size of the pelvis is virtually identical to the size of the baby's head. And that is baby's head, which we call flex. So it's sort of, his chin is resting on his neck. So it's this bit here that is precisely the same measurement as the pelvis. So if the head is deflexed, the size becomes bigger. So anybody who's trying to push something through where the 2 things are exactly the same size will know the difficulty that is. And sometimes that head gets deflexed, and that makes it even harder. And anybody who's seen newborn babies, they look absolutely disgusting, and I don't know nothing about it. They're all bruised and they're swollen, and the head looks as though it's just come out of Star Trek movie. Those of you too young to know what Star Trek was like, that was the science fiction film with people with funny heads, etc. So it is very, very traumatic. And the next slide I've got is just really show. Sorry, carry on. You mentioned it. Next is this isn't a real pregnancy. You can see it's plastic, and it's really to show the mother. In our pelvis, we have long blood vessels, which they take the blood down to legs, and then they bring blood back to your heart. And it's just like a piping. But the only difference is the soft pipes. They're not like your rigid pipes in your house. So the baby basically is impacted in there. So it presses against all the vessels, bowel, everything. So that's why sometimes you get varicose veins, and it's very, very uncomfortable. And sometimes when I'm talking to her, I say, oh, I feel backache, I feel this, and I feel that. And my husband's looking there completely at what you're talking about. So I said, okay, if I had about, I don't know, 10, 12 pounds of bricks, and I tie them to your belly and say, carry them around 8, 9 months, I think you will feel backache, or you'll feel pressure. You know, can you imagine carrying that much weight? And that's basically what women are doing. A huge amount of physiological changes. Your blood becomes thicker, you have a lot more blood, there's a pressure, your bowels slow down. Not only slow down, because the bowel works by actually pushing the food contents through. The hormones of pregnancy slow the bowel down quite considerably. And secondly, you've got physical mass, tumour, whatever you want to call it, pressing on your bowels, so it makes the movement even worse. So that's why so many women become constipated. So the best thing, if you're looking, is not to have big meals, to eat small amounts regularly. It's like any pipe. If you've got dodgy pipes in your house and you flush something down, particularly if you've got a macerate, they get blocked. But if you have small amount of things going through at a time, then they will go through. And the same with the bowel movements in pregnancy. But the important thing about any complication, I think, of childbirth is the pain. Just sorry, can I'll do this, yeah. The most, I said about the most dangerous journey you will ever undertake, but also it's the most painful experience that you will ever undergo as well. And one of the things, I found this quote for somebody, I still find, how could I actually describe the pain of childbirth? Is anybody who's been in a childbirth in terms of either observing or had baby will know how horrendous it is. My wife is one of these, well, I don't want anything unnatural in my substance. She uses the word natural as though somehow that's answer to all the life's ills. And nature isn't as wonderful as we like to think it is. It's great when you're in Yorkshire moors and looking at the green scenery, but in human terms, there are lots and lots of things which nature hasn't got it quite right. I mean, I say to them, heart disease is natural, cancer is natural, but you don't want to leave them untreated because it's natural. So in the same way, childbirth, yes, it's natural, humans are out with children, but things do go wrong. And what this person described, he said, you imagine 20 bones getting fractured at the same time, the pain you would feel, and that's equivalent to most women experiencing pain in childbirth. I think the best quote that summed it up for me was the next one, which I can't read the name of the person who said it now, but she said, I realise why women die in childbirth, because it's preferable, i.e. the pain is so, and you might think it's tongue-in-cheek, but actually, if you think of the pain, it's really, really painful. And I was coming back to my wife, she said, when we had our first baby, she said, I don't want anything, I don't want pethidine, I don't want gas in air, I just want, I said, look, why don't we just leave things until we get there and you can decide what to do? I said, no, I'm not having anything, definitely not epidural anyway. So we lived in Chesterfield, hospital was in Sheffield, because I was working there as a research registrar, and we've got a little place somebody gave us for free to live in, because I didn't have enough money to pay rent or buy a house at the time, and my wife was pregnant, she hadn't started working. We'd got a pupillage, but hadn't started yet, so we were sort of trying to manage eating grass and things like that, what one does when you're on the way. And so when we went to the hospital on a Tuesday, I think it was, and said, well, you're in early labour, nothing happening, you can stay here or go home. So we went home, she spent about 24, 48 hours in the bath trying to cope with pain. So when we went to the hospital next day, about near midnight, she's actually quite far on in labour, but finding it really difficult to cope. When she really got into labour, she progressed quickly, but the pain was horrendous. So I had a paper in my hand, and she went, "Put that effing thing down!" And she said, "I want an," she was really, "I want an epidural, I want this." The midwife said, "Look, you're about to deliver, you don't need an epidural." The British said, No, you're in collusion with him, you're effing trying to kill me, I want." This was the woman who didn't want anything. But to be fair, most women just lose control because of the pain. And that pain can be horrendous. My wife's labouring scale of 1 to 10 in difficulty was probably 1. And I always remind her what the words she used and what she said. And you imagine some women go beyond the scale of 10 and it's often 11 and 12 and it's just awful. I don't want to put you off, but we do have things to make things better. And part of the reason why Bradford Infirmary, Doncaster spends probably 40-50 million pounds each just on the maternity unit is to make childbirth safer and less unpleasant. Any of you who are a member of NCT or listen to them, it's not music, there's no Mozart, there's no Beethoven. If there is, fantastic, good luck to you. But 99.9% of women, it's really awful, and that's why you need a good doctor and a good midwife to help you get through. Once you have your baby, for most of you, it's definitely worth it, but things can be very, very difficult. Pain relief, we have things like gas and air Entonox. I think it started with Queen Victoria, and there were many, especially male doctors in those days, who thought it was dreadful. Women should suffer because somehow it promotes bonding. So on that theory, I often wonder how on earth did fathers bonded. And mind you, there is a community, I don't know if they still exist in South America. What they used to do was they used to tie a string around the male gonads. So every time a woman has a painful contraction, she pulled on it. So the idea was to share the pain.
Share the pain.
So I don't know how it went on, but it reminds me of a joke. There's a joke about, I don't know if it's true or not. There were a couple in labour, they were very close, and somebody invented a device and said, right, the father of the child can actually choose to take X amount of pain that he wishes. So, yeah, I'll take 20%, the husband said. So, okay, don't feel anything, a little bit like that. No, I'll take more. So he literally took 100%. Both of them were great. So that was really easy. Anyway, they went home with a baby, wonderful, and then found the postman knocked out on their drive. So I've just said complications. I've just repeated this slide just to say why women it's preferable. Why women die in childbirth? Because preferable women do die in childbirth. Thankfully, a lot less in this country now than there used to be, and that's because the changes in the maternity, where medicine's advanced, the way individuals' lifestyle has improved. But there are still many parts of the world where women die in massive numbers, and I'll show you that. And the four biggest causes of maternal mortality were cysticercosis is basically infection. Infection was awful, and then there's hemorrhage, convulsions, some of you know as eclampsia or high blood pressure, and then finally was, I know it's not quite right, illegal abortions were one of the biggest causes of maternal mortality. And I put it in because most of us think of illegal abortions, now it's thankfully very, very rare. I don't think it occurs in this country now. But they're a massive cause of death due to infection, due to all sorts of other things. I'll touch on it in a minute. So if you look at infection, and I've got, you can't see, the reason I've got to pay homage to certain people who've actually made things different. Because you might think all of us, when we go to the toilet or do something, we wash our hands or wash because we want to prevent infection, and it's taken as given, it's common sense. It's just like when you're thirsty, you drink water, you think of the same thing. But not that long ago, we had no concept of infection or why anybody developed an infection. So it was not unusual for a doctor or a midwife to do something, deliver a placenta, just go on and treat somebody else to do. So if you went into a hospital or into an institution to deliver your baby, you were lucky if you came out alive, because the risk of getting serious infection was quite marked. And there were quite a few people. There was Alexander Gordon. He suggested that the midwives should wash hands. So he was the first one to recognise. And there was another chap, Wendell Holmes. He, in the 19th century, realised that there was a thing that was passed on. They didn't quite understand what it was, but they realised the infection was passed on from one person to another. And then I think Ingman Summers, I can't say his name, in Vienna, maternity, was the first one who actually realised that the students attending post-mortem, whenever they went to a ward or maternity unit, the infection rates just shot up. So he actually he suggested carbolic soap to wash yourself with. And then Pasteur, he suggested, and then Leonard Cookson was another person. So once, we'll show you another slide, once we realised what infection was, the mortality started coming down. Simple measures like washing your hands, cleaning yourself, not passing blood from one to another. But a huge number of women died from just infection. Now, hemorrhage is another awful condition which women used to die, and there are a number of reasons. There's just tears from the childbirth itself. Now, the biggest reason is the placenta is sort of attached. You've all seen placenta. Placenta is basically the baby's, the way it's attached to the mother. And the babies are quite parasitic because they take everything from the mum. And the connection is quite amazing because there's hundreds and thousands of blood vessels which are connected to the maternal uterus, to the placenta. Now, what's more amazing is when the placenta separates, you imagine if you cut one blood vessel, what happens? You can bleed to death. You've got so many blood vessels, which makes you wonder why on earth the bleeding doesn't continue. And the reason for that is because the uterus contracts, so it basically squeezes the blood vessels in the maternal uterus to stop them bleeding. So that if the uterus is tired, particularly in the old days when there was no cesarean section, no way of expediting delivery, and the baby comes out 3-4 days later, the uterus is like a muscle. So it's no different to my muscle when you've been running. Once you run 25 miles, the muscles aren't going to be strong enough to be able to do that. And a labour is equivalent to almost 20 miles, and that's an average. If you think of a long labour, so imagine you've run 50 or 60 miles, and you're still asked to do something, the uterus has very little left in terms of contraction. And sometimes, even before childbirth, the placenta would separate, and a woman could just bleed to death even without much blood loss coming. It used to be called concealed hemorrhage. So there are a number, thankfully, with transfusion, with the drugs, quick delivery, emptying the uterus, all that has changed. I say this changed, but these things can still go wrong, and it depends on the person looking after you. If they don't recognise the problem quickly, particularly hemorrhage, then because it occurs so rapidly, that the midwife or the doctor who's not looking after you doesn't recognise the problem very quickly, you can actually lose the mother or lead to serious postpartum complications. Because blood is your oxygen, if you like. That's how you get oxygen. So if you are starved of oxygen, the mother can become brain damaged because there's not enough oxygen circulating, because there's not enough blood circulating long enough. So I said the battle for reduction of blood loss as a cause of maternal death has been mostly won in the Western world, but Unfortunately, the drugs and the skills that we have in the developed world are not very common in the developing world, and their mortality is still what it used to be many years ago. Eclampsia, toxemia, convulsions is an interesting condition, although the mortality from UK has almost disappeared. Women still die from it. It's very, very rare. We still don't know what causes it. And that's the person who discovered it wrote down a Nobel Prize. But what we do know is it affects everything from your brain to your heart, to your lungs, to your kidneys, and if it's not treated appropriately and early enough, you can get severe problems. You can begin with kidney failure, you can have women who become brain damaged, you could get cardiac problems. So it's very important because it's recognised early and treated early, and that's where the antenatal care comes into it. Antenatal care serves a lot of functions. Obviously, is to pick up, there's no issues with the baby, but all women have their blood pressure checked, their urine checked. Urine for make sure the kidneys are working properly, they haven't got protein, and blood pressure because one of the first signs of eclampsia or pre-eclampsia is rising blood pressure. If the problem becomes severe, then the best treatment is delivery of the baby. And you still get women, I come across cases where it's not being recognised until very late, and sometimes that can be quite serious for both mother and the baby. So it's important that the medical professions realise that. Okay. Abortions, I think I mentioned already, is just to let you know, it was in 1938. Now, most of us think of legal abortions with David Steele's bill in 1967, which is fantastic, really, because it changed. When I was a junior registrar, I went on a course, and one of the professors showed me a slide which had a dialysis, renal failure and dialysis, and it was up there, and after 67 it just shot down. And the reason was because once the abortion became legal, women stopped suffering from septic shock, these infections, and that actually eliminated so many kidney failures. And the same applies to maternal deaths. It was in 1938, a doctor aborted a child, a 13-year-old girl who was raped, and he got another colleague to agree with him, and he handed himself to the authorities after he carried out the abortion. But the judge must have been quite an intelligent man. He said as long as two doctors agree it's the safety of the mother, etc., then abortion can be allowed. And that was put on statute by the 1967 Act by David Steele. David Steele, for those of you who might not be politically minded, was the leader of the Liberal Party, and then I don't think he became the leader of Lib Dems, did he? It was him and David Owen were the sort of joint leaders. And the other things is blood clots. I mentioned one of the reasons is because of the pressure on women's leg. They tend to be less mobile, the blood becomes more stagnant, and certain women are at increased risk. Those that have had a tendency to have blood clots, those that are immobile, those that are high BMI, where the weight is high. So if for any reason they're in hospital or they need anything, it's important for the professionals to recognise that they need anticoagulants. They're often injections to thin their blood to stop them developing clots in their legs. And failure to do so really is negligence. And the same way, if any of you are travelling, you've heard of blood clot from long air travel. One of the ways to make sure that you don't sit still, keep moving your legs, contracting your muscles, and also take an aspirin. Just go to a chemist and buy an aspirin and take so that it won't stop it completely, but it lowers your chances. So, the next slide is basically to give you all the different causes of maternal mortality around the world. And the one after that is to give you what happened in the UK. If you took 100,000 live births, it says 10, but it's probably less than that. 10 women probably will die, and not all of them due to childbirth. This is women who died within the first 12 months, and some of them due to suicide, depression. In fact, 60% of the death now are due to mental health issues, because pregnancy itself lends to postnatal depression as well. But if you look at somewhere like Sierra Leone, the death rate in UK is 10, in Sierra Leone is 1,500 or 15,000. So most of the developed countries is quite high. And I think that's a massive underestimation. The reason is because nobody really collects the statistics properly there. If you look at in the UK, one of the good things about the NHS is we can get good statistics. Even in the developed world, statistics health-wise are not as good as the UK one. And if you look at the American ones, America, the rate is a bit higher. You'd expect a country which is, it might not seem much different to you, but it's actually massive. Because if you look at the American statistics between the haves and have-nots, and they're completely skewed. The ones that have, they're a lot lower than us, and the have-nots are much higher, and then the average comes down lower. So it's still those who can afford healthcare will do better in life. And the same is, I've just given the figures, the next one. Now, I've said mortality now is 10 per 100,000 now. If you go back 200 years back, it was over 500 women per 100,000 met who used to die during childbirth. And again, it's probably an underestimation because we didn't collect the figures. These are just from various things. And then if we go to the graph, you can see here the maternal mortality in 450s it's come down. See where it's, and then suddenly how it plummets. And if we just go to the next slide, I've written the reasons for what's in there later on. Yeah, what I was going to say is that maternal death was so common that the Church of England used to have a prayer in their hymn book, which was just removed, and it said, the safe deliverance and preservation from the great dangers of childbirth. So it was routinely prayed, and that was the routine prayer. So the reasons why maternal mortality is reduced, because obviously we're all better educated, families are smaller as a result, so less children means statistically less chance of dying as a contraception has improved, so improved health, nutrition have always played a part. But I think the most important thing is the antenatal care, management of conditions like preeclampsia, hemorrhage, blood transfusion, antibiotics. They've contributed massively